Hey, Loretta and everybody, how did we get to episode 31? My goodness, the time's fleeting and the weeks just go by like pim. But here we are again, and certainly not running out of topics yet. So today we decided to have a conversation about acceptance. Without acceptance, we can't actually create anything. And in our health, it becomes quite an important thing. Resistance can be a big issue if we're dealing with health issues or anything that we're really not comfortable with in our lives. And bypassing doesn't work either. So we're going to talk today about how accepting things exactly as they are right now, and the fact that we can't create our health until we can be honest about exactly where we are right now with our health and our current reality. We're going to talk about how we can only do this with compassionate awareness, okay? Not being rough on ourselves, but looking at exactly where we are and what is truly going on right now. But before we dive into this, it's a very important and exciting topic, which I can speak to from my own personal experience. I'd just like to put out a short call to action. We have had incredible feedback about this podcast and how beneficial it is for people that are sick, but even those who aren't, because this really speaks to the human journey, actually. We're just focusing it on health. So please, if you have found value in it, please share it. Share it on your platforms, share it with your friends, share it in your groups. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, we ask that you please write us a review and follow us. It really makes a difference to our rankings. We just want to be able to get this message out to as many people as possible. And the timing couldn't be better because it's quite intense out there. So, Loretta, focusing on healing requires acceptance of where we're at. So if you're really sick, that could be the potential of having to embark on some awful healing modality like chemo, as I did, and with all the downside of that, even if it does end up healing. It might require reflection on how terrified we might be of dying and even the possibility that we may die. It requires us to have the courage actually to permit the negative to inform our understanding, but without it defining our approach to the future. So, yeah, I'm just going to give a short one or two examples from my journey, and then Loretta's going to dive in because so much of this is the kind of work she does with people to bring them to health or to be able to play a large role in becoming their own healer. And this work doesn't require you choosing a particular healing modality. We've said that over and over again. It doesn't matter whether you're choosing or have chosen chemo or a natural route or to do nothing. This journey that Loretta can embark on with you and what we bring is relevant to whatever other things you are doing to heal yourself, because it's very multifaceted and it's not a cure-all, as we also say every time, but certainly for me, this was huge in helping me heal my cancer, but also to change my life. So, yeah, I had to be, firstly, I was so furious that I got cancer because I had a very healthy lifestyle. I was angry. Honestly, I think it even went to the point of fury and resentment. I'm like, how did this happen to me? It's not fair. We all go through that. It's the same as the grieving process. First, it's denial. It's like, this is impossible. It's impossible that I have stage 4 cancer and it's galloping. It's not possible. And then it becomes, I think, anger, and then sadness, and then a lot of confusion because it's like, now what do I do to help myself heal, especially if you've been on a natural path. Most people listening to this podcast have probably been on some kind of path to exercise and eat well or become more spiritual or more present. And when you're on that path, sometimes it makes it even harder to make a choice about what to do because everybody tries to influence you. There's so many different paths. Yeah, and that's why we've spoken about intuition and how to use that to make the decision. But I ended up needing to choose chemo. And therein lay one of the biggest parts of my journey of acceptance. I did accept I had cancer. I mean, I went to 3 people, they all gave me the same diagnosis. And at some point, if you don't come to acceptance, well, you have to when you've got a diagnosis like that. And the resistance becomes the true suffering, actually. But that's not to say we just focus on bypassing it or on wanting to be fixed or healed straight away, but we can't resist it all the time because that's very punishing. But I chose chemo, and therein lay the biggest journey of acceptance for me because I'd never touched allopathic medicine for 32 years. I read the little booklet with all the side effects, which are more terrifying in a way than the cancer themselves. I knew how toxic the drugs were. I had no idea actually how many side effects I would have. I had no idea how it would stop my life completely. I had no idea how sick I would be from the chemicals that healed me. But I had to go into full acceptance, and that took a bit of time. In the beginning, for example, I was putting golden sparkles and all these affirmative love and gratitude messages on my chemo bag because I really didn't want these chemicals to have a negative effect on my body. And a young black nurse, a big strapping guy, he was amazing. He said to me one day, "What are you doing to that bag?" And I said, "No, I don't want all these toxic chemicals to mess me up." And he's like, "Well, that's also where your healing's going to lie. So be very careful not to sparkle out all the healing." So from that, there were so many points in my journey. I had to accept the fact that I was terrified of dying when I really thought I wasn't. I had to accept the fact that I wasn't as spiritual as I thought I was, because otherwise I wouldn't have been terrified of dying. I had to accept the fact that I'd been spiritually and self-help bypassing. I mean, the amount of acceptance is, I don't want to go on. I think you get the picture. So Loretta's going to speak more to the fact that I had to do deep, compassionate self-awareness, not to blame myself for how I got there, but to look at how this had happened, because it clearly wasn't because of my diet or lifestyle on that level. But I don't take things sitting down. And once I realized my healing lay in this very place where we talk to, I then had to accept that as a reality, but without any blame on myself and without trying to fix it, but with a clear vision of knowing that things need to change because my inner world, had created this and my inner world needed to change. So acceptance requires dropping at this double standard that too often characterizes our relationship with the world. And Gabor Mate, I quote him there. It's not about blaming ourselves, but it's about accepting the whole. Now I'm repeating myself, but it's also about being in the paradox. In feeling, acceptance means you feel the fear. You feel the results of the chemicals going in your body. You have to be present with all of that, and that can create huge fear if you're really sick. And then it's to work with it, to focus on the vision of what you really want with full acceptance of what is. And that's easier said than done, but it really is transformative, that. So Loretta, maybe I should let you to speak a bit now because I've been rabbiting on for 9 minutes.
No, that was great. Thanks, Antoinette. So I just want to speak to a bit of experience with patients. And I've seen a lot of sick people in my life, right? And I've been a sick person. So I've never had a life-threatening illness, but I have been a sick person as well. And I know how out of control it can feel when things go down in your body that you might get the diagnosis and you may know what it's all about, but the fact of the matter is it's out of control. You have no control over it. And that is terrifying. on a number of levels. So the one thing that I noticed with patients was that the people who fought the hardest were generally the people who lost the battle the quickest. And so, I mean, it took me years to work out why that was. Because you'd think our whole humanness, our egoic reality is based on, our filter of reality is based on the fact that we have these limiting beliefs about ourselves. And our ego tells us that the purpose of our life is to fix those things so that we can have what we want. So basically what we get programmed by our ego is, when I have fixed the fact that I'm not good enough, then I will be worthy and deserving of having what I want. And so that is an ingrained, it's like a knee-jerk reaction, right? So of course, when we get sick, that knee-jerk reaction is, once I have fixed what's wrong with me, then I can have what I want. And so ironically, it's like I have to fix the problem before I can have the healing. Now, that sounds perfectly logical, doesn't it? I mean, you might be listening to this and going, what is this woman on about? That's exactly how it works. Okay, well, I want to tell you that's exactly how it doesn't work. That's the paradox. And the paradox of this is that when you're fixing, your focus is on what it is you're fixing. Even when people say, I'm focusing on the solution. The solution to what? The problem. So where's the focus actually? It's on the problem. And so it is a knee-jerk reaction for us to want to fix. But when we have signs and symptoms, we're focusing on fixing the disease, the diagnosis, the signs and symptoms. And if that was the correct strategy, well, then everyone would get better. But what if the signs and symptoms are the expression of a different cause? Then when you're only trying to fix the signs and symptoms, you're still not actually fixing the problem. So let me just, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. Let me try and clarify this with an example. So if you drink too much alcohol and you wake up in the morning and you have a headache and you take a painkiller, takes away your headache. If tonight you drink again, a large quantity, tomorrow you're going to have a headache, you're going to take a painkiller, it's going to take away the headache. So the signs and symptoms are you have a hangover. But the cause is you drank too much alcohol the night before. So you can keep on taking the painkiller for your hangover, but until you take away the source of why you need the painkiller in the first place, you're going to be sitting with a problem. So the people who fight the hardest, before they've done the work of accepting the truth of where they are, and the truth of where you are is so much more than the diagnostic label that you get. So it's part of it, right? There's nothing wrong with getting a diagnosis, please. I'm not saying that. But the truth of where you are is not just the diagnosis you have. The truth of where you are is, how do you feel about what you have? What are the fears and the concerns that you have about what you have? How are you speaking to yourself about what you have? What is the story you're unconsciously telling yourself about why you have what you have? All of those things are part of where you are. And those are not questions that we're generally used to asking ourselves, especially not in our Western medical paradigm. Because our medical paradigm is your signs and symptoms get grouped together into a thing, a label called the diagnosis. And once you have the diagnostic label, that's what we're focusing on. But it's much more than that. It is much more than that. And so your reality is, where are you right now? And for many people, what Antoinette was describing is like, well, this can't be happening. This can't be happening to me. I'm a health conscious spiritual person. And then it's like, well, actually, it is happening to me. Why is this happening to me? This is not fair. All right. When you try and sparkle that out, when you are not actually being real about what those things, those processes that you're going through, when you're not talking about that because you don't want to upset your nearest and dearest, when you are not even admitting any of that stuff to yourself because you want to be the brave warrior, because that's who you identify with being, that is a lack of acceptance. So the reason why we don't accept is because we think that if we accept, it means we've given up. So it's almost, so if you look at this in a sort of a religious context, it's a bit like if I say, dear God, I accept that I have cancer. We think that implies that it's like, well, dear God, I accept that I have cancer, so it's okay that I have cancer. So we might just carry on having cancer and whatever the end result of that is, right? And that's actually not the truth. That's where the paradox comes in. So when you are denying the truth of your feelings and, you've got all this unconscious stuff that you're not even aware of, what's actually happening in your physiology is you're activating your sympathetic nervous system, your fight, flight, freeze, whatever, that mode, okay? You're activating the emergency brake or the accelerator, whichever you want to look at it, right? And when you are not accepting where you are, your parasympathetic nervous system is basically shutting off. No matter how positive you are, no matter what beautiful facade you're showing to the world, what's happening inside your body is this complete dysregulation of your nervous system. And your parasympathetic nervous system, when that is active, that's when your immune system is working at its best. And on some level, all disease has an immune component, okay? So just from a physiological point of view, when we are not real about where we are, when we're not accepting the truth of where we are, which is not just the truth of your diagnosis, it's the truth of everything that your diagnosis means to you and the people who love you and the people who you love and how you identify. I identify as a spiritual, healthy, strong, resilient warrior. And now I have this disease that's potentially going to defeat me. But I don't want to identify as the person who has a disease that's going to defeat me. So I'm going to pretend that I don't have that and I'm just going to fight it, right? The more you do that, the more you are actually skewing your physiology in the direction of more of what you've got, right? And so, we talk about the hidden stresses. Sorry, Antoinette. We talk about the hidden stresses and the unconscious stresses that make us sick. When we don't do the acceptance part, we just continue and perpetuate that very thing. And then we say things like, and I've heard this so many times, fought so courageously, lost the battle against the disease. Yeah. And I've huge sympathy for that. But the fact of the matter is, it's because it's not a battle, my friends. When you're going into battle, there's already war happening here. You don't want to add to the war. You want to bring some peace and negotiation to the table so that you can actually create a different outcome. And so I keep on going to the war metaphors, don't I? All right. So it's like there's war going on and someone needs to bring us all to the negotiating table so that we can negotiate a different outcome. And acceptance, in other words, being honest about where you are and how you feel and how that's affecting you and how this has thrown your perception of who you are into disarray, is part of the acceptance. And once we do that, we don't go down the rabbit hole of giving up. What we do is we allow ourselves to breathe out. We allow our parasympathetic nervous system to turn on. And it's from that point that we can go, okay, this is what I've got. This is what I'd love. Whatever that health looks like. And it's from that point that we can really start the healing. Sorry, Antoinette, go.
No. I just wanted to say what I should have said up front. I was making friends with my cancer, making friends with having my hair shaved off, making friends with the chemo side effects and how it stopped my life. Really, it's not about battling or fighting it. It doesn't work. And some of the language out there is like fight cancer. It's like fight back. It's like And you're right, Loretta. I mean, losing my hair for any woman, if you think you're not vain, wait until you have to have all your hair
100%.
shaved off. It's so
100%.
incredible how precious hair is to us women.
100%.
And yet the gifts, so you have to accept there's certain, sometimes life brings us to things that force us into changes we wouldn't have otherwise made or even knew we had to make. And when it forces you, whether it's bankruptcy or severe illness or whatever, if there's no acceptance, there's just this constant fight and resistance, and that takes you down more. So having my hair shaved off, I eventually thought, well, actually, in some spiritual traditions, people don't have hair. Why do they shave their hair off? So I started doing some research. And then I thought, well, why don't I use this as a symbol of letting go of whatever I need to let go? And then my friend and I went off to this hairdresser randomly in Howick to have my hair shaved off. They made a whole ritual of it. I've got goosebumps now. They brought cake and coffee and they played music, and they were all these two hairdressers were dancing around me, and afterwards we went for breakfast. Listen, I didn't stop eating on chemo, which was a great gift for me. And I was like, wow. And then living with the vulnerability of having no hair is such an interesting experience, because all you've got to bring is you. And not that I've ever had great hair. And in fact, I look pretty good without hair. I was a Sinead O'Connor. But it's just that incredible. You feel completely naked. You feel like, but then I was like, well, now maybe I need to bring who I really am to this, which is not my hair or how I look.
100%.
So
100%.
there was and that the chemo crushed my life completely. I've spoken about this before, but once I went into acceptance of that, there was a gift in it. And there's always gifts in these things. And if we don't exercise acceptance, I think we end up just in that resentment mode and anger mode. And sometimes it's only in hindsight we see the gift. So
100%. So just to that about the gift. So if we live in this universe that seems to be polarized, but it's actually our minds that are polarized, that divide everything into black and white, good and bad. Now, this is very easy to say from this place where I'm sitting today on the chair in my study without disease. Okay, this is not easy when you're the person who's got the disease. Actually, before I head down this rabbit hole, I just want to say one other thing. The more we fight, the more we fuel the fear. The more we fuel the fear, the less we activate the healing. We can't heal from a place of fear. We can be fearful. We don't have to get rid of the fear. We can be fearful, acknowledge the fear, and try and befriend the fear so that we can have the fear and still create what we love. This is actually the key, and this is what's so difficult. It is difficult. That's not easy, okay? And that's also why I can never understand why when someone gets a dread disease diagnosis, the first person they don't go and see is the therapist. And I don't just mean any therapist necessarily. I mean, it could be a coach, it could be whoever. But like, I've never had cancer before. And I have had a lot of experience with other people who've had cancer. So maybe I'm not the greatest example, but the truth is I've never had cancer before. So what makes me think that on an emotional and a whatever level, I can 100% handle what that is? So I'm not suggesting that everyone's got to, you've got to have people holding your hand constantly, but when you're in it, you know how it is, right? When someone else is telling you about their problem, it's much easier for you to see a solution for them than when you're the person who's in the problem. It's more difficult to see it when you're in it. Anyway. So I just want to speak to the what is the acceptance itself? Like what do we actually mean by acceptance? So we've said it's about facing the truth of where you are and who you are and who you identify as. And so our minds polarize everything into good and bad, right? This is evil, this is good, this is support, this is challenge. But the truth is that at the level of like our spirituals, your spirit, so if your spirit's eternal, your spirit doesn't really worry about birth and death. Well, because birth and death is a physical process, but the spirit is eternal. It carries on, right? So your physical body gets born and your physical body dies, but that part of you that's eternal continues. So at that level, things are always actually neutral. Now, this is a very difficult concept. You don't want to start applying this to heavy things in your life straight away. You need to sort of almost practice and exercise your muscle. The point I'm trying to make is that every single experience that you go through is either something that you've created because you've wanted to create it, like the things that you love, the things that inspire you, you've created because you love them. The things that happen to you in your life and that you've unconsciously created without knowing why, and that are super challenging, they're the ones that have the opportunities for the insights, the getting to know yourself deeply, and the learnings. And so for example, if we just take business, because business is like quite straightforward, it's not quite as emotive as health. But if in my business, I launch a program and nobody is interested in signing up for the program, okay? That's a negative experience for me, because I could be like super excited about this program. I think it's amazing. It's going to change people's lives. And then I do all this marketing. I invest all this time and effort into it. And then no one wants to buy it. All right. So I could go, well, this is it. I'm an absolute failure. Or I could go, okay, so did I create what I love? Well, partly I still love the program. Did I create what I love? 10 people buying the program? No, I didn't create that. Okay. So what's the learning I can take out of this? So maybe the learning is that your marketing wasn't great. Maybe the learning is that I followed some other marketing gurus' step-by-step formula that worked for them, but they didn't sound like me at all. Maybe and I've had this learning from because I've done this. I've launched things that haven't sold, okay, more than once. One of my big learnings from that is I wasn't completely honest about what it could do for people, or what I believed it was worth, or I toned it down, because I didn't want to get criticism. So does that mean the program was awful? No, the program was great. My messaging wasn't that great because I was too frightened to get out there and go, you know what, guys, this is what I'm selling, and this is why I think it's absolutely amazing, and this is my opinion and my stand on it. And so I had to float a couple of things that absolutely didn't work, until finally I was like, oh my goodness, that's like the common thread through all of them. All right. So everything is an opportunity. Everything is an opportunity for a learning, an insight, and new insights into yourself. And you know what? Those insights into yourself are largely around where you are trapping yourself, where you're keeping yourself small, where you're not actually valuing yourself, where you are literally, for whatever reason, usually to keep yourself safe, suppressing who you really are. It's like you're putting on the lid on your magnificence. So acceptance, another word that's bandied about for this is surrender. Surrender really sounds like you've waved the red flag and you're giving up, okay? But you know what happens when an army surrenders? Generally, the killing stops in a war. And yes, everyone doesn't always get what they want. But you know what? Surrender doesn't mean giving up. Surrender means accepting. For me, it's accepting where we are right now. That's one foot in reality, and you can have the other foot in desire. But when we've got both feet in desire and we're not actually accepting the reality, can you see that there is absolutely no room for change and insight there? Go, Antoinette.
Acceptance, yes. Just to add to that, requires looking at our own internal state and how we could have played a role in this, but with compassion, without the judgment. And it also requires honest looking around and acceptance of the reality of our relationships, our jobs we maybe don't like, how we live in the world, how we operate. Because really the awareness of that is where a lot of gifts lie. It's not always easy and it takes time. So don't think, I mean, that thing you say, why don't people go to therapists? I can tell you right now, I did, but only a few months in, because when you get a hectic diagnosis, it's such there's so much flurry around how to
You can't do it
physically
straight
start
away.
healing yourself.
Yeah.
So maybe because you are a homeopath and you might have that taped, some of us had to run around trying to figure out should we get second opinions. But I 100% am on board with you that if I had not gone to a coach quite fast, I wouldn't have had the same journey to healing. So it is a valid point.
And so, sorry, I didn't mean to imply that everyone needs a coach or a therapist, you know. So maybe you've been on a journey and you haven't needed that. I'm this kind of person. This is my kind of thing. You know what? I'm in a situation that's completely unfamiliar to me. If nothing else, I just need to speak to someone who doesn't have any kind of investment into what my decisions are and how it's, in other words, my decision is not going to affect that person, because my decision is going to affect my family, but my decision is not going to affect the therapist. And so I didn't mean to imply that you go to the therapist on like day 2. I mean, obviously you need time to integrate all of this stuff, but to think that we can just blithely,
it's true.
For me, that doesn't make any sense. Like how
Actually,
you can navigate.
right. You're so right. Sorry to interrupt you, but I forget some elements of my journey because it's so multifaceted. I did go, for me, it was a kinesiologist, a person I trusted. I didn't just go, oh, what healing route am I going to take? I worked with family systems therapy, I don't know, kinesiologists on multiple levels to try and figure out the way forward. So to get someone like you, if you can find the right person to give a perspective, as the kinesiologist did to me, and to dig into, like, I unconsciously wanted to die. My body wanted chemo, didn't want fasting. I would never have been able to come to that without some assistance right up front. So actually, yes, we're on the same page.
So I just want to, I think maybe this is sort of the last thing that I have to say about this, is that we've been so indoctrinated by the personal development movement, by the positive psychology movement, by the spiritual movement. And I'm not knocking any of those, right? Because it depends on how an individual perceives any of that messaging, okay? But essentially, we have been so indoctrinated, I believe, on having to be strong. And in our culture, you know, busyness is revered. Not needing to rest is applauded. Working your fingers to the bone is revered. Sacrificing yourself for others, oh my God, like amazeballs, right? So it is a natural tendency to want to be the hero of your journey. It's natural, right? Because everybody's clapping for that. People don't want to hear that I'm terrified of dying. Your family don't want to see you in pieces because you are so confused and you're so scared. And you don't want them to see you in pieces because you're trying to protect them, right? So the whole narrative around acceptance that we have in our Western way of thinking is so skewed away from it. And then you've got your ego telling you, on some level, deeply unconsciously, right? You have to be a better version of the strong super you, and maybe then you will deserve to get better. And so this is the other thing, what Antoinette said about the compassion. So when you uncover that, I don't know, let's make it very obvious. You have lung cancer because you smoke, partly because you have a gene that makes you very susceptible to cancer, and you've smoked 20 cigarettes for 20 years. You might go, well, the smoking definitely contributed to the cancer. So when you now hate yourself because you were so terrible, because you should have given up smoking 20 years ago and you've brought this on yourself, all you're doing is ramping up your sympathetic nervous system again. So this is hard because, we all like to imbibe from the fountain of guilt, and, we stand under the cat of nine tails of self-flagellation, because actually that's also honorable, like take your dues, take it like a man, take responsibility. But know this, you don't know what you don't know. And so if the reason why you smoked for 20 years was because you had some sort of unconscious something that made you not able to be kind to yourself, should you be punished for that? No. Is the disease a punishment for that? No. But is it a potential insight into what lay underneath the smoking, for example? I mean, I'm just making that very obvious. Please, no offense to anyone who smokes, okay? Because we all have these underlying beliefs that stop us from actually being kind to ourselves. And those don't just roll over and play dead because you have a serious disease. In fact, those come out and go, yeah, see, told you from the beginning. This is what you get when you, right? And so this is why the compassion needs to become really, really important. And one of the ways that I think you can do that is to ask yourself, what are the facts? What is the story I'm making up about the facts? Because the drama is usually part of what allows you to do the self-flagellation. So that's one of the ways, okay? Or you know what? If you were watching a movie and the person who is you was the main character in the film, and this person discovered that there was this unconscious thing that they didn't know about themselves, and this pattern that they were, because they had this pain from their childhood that they hadn't healed, or weren't actually even aware of because they suppressed it so deep. Like, how would you feel towards that character in the movie? Most of us would, some people would go, well, they got what they deserve. Well, I think we really need to examine how we speak to ourselves and how we speak to everyone else then, right? But most of us will have compassion for that. You know why? Because we all know what it feels like to not be able to do the right thing. And we all know how painful that is when we punish ourselves because we didn't do the right thing. And we all know what it feels like when we think we've messed up and how we treat ourselves. So this is not about like being completely okay and going, well, you know, and using your wounds as an excuse. This is about seeing, you know what, this is the reality. I can see it now. And you know what, this came about as a consequence of a survival mechanism of a really little kid who actually had no other options. And so I can have compassion for that. So sometimes when you take yourself out and you imagine you're watching your life as a movie, you know what? If it was just a case of having to face the fact that you have a dread disease, I already feel sorry for you. I've already got compassion for that because it is so, it's, who wants that? No one is consciously working to create that for themselves. No one is consciously working to create anything awful for themselves. We're not doing it. So can we take responsibility once we can see what it is, right? Without having to be the judge and the jury and the guy who puts the noose around our neck. Can we maybe just not do that? And if we don't know how to do that, can we maybe get someone to help us to just do that? But you know what very often happens is your ego goes, well, I don't have time for that stuff, Loretta. I don't have time for that. You don't understand. Okay, so you know what? If you're on a ticking time bomb, then the first thing you do is get someone to help you, like Antoinette had the kinesiologist. Kinesiologist didn't tell Antoinette what to do. The kinesiologist helped Antoinette get the message from her body about what was true for her. So get someone to help. First step is get someone to help you get clarity on what is your next step forward in your treatment program. And you know what? Once you're on the program, now you can take a deep breath and then you can start doing some of the other stuff, because you also don't just wake up one morning and say, well, I accept that I've got cancer and I could die. This is a process. But in the meantime, you do need to be treated, let's just say, right? For whatever reason. So Antoinette had a galloping cancer. She didn't have the luxury of 6 months to decide whether she was going to do the chemo or not. So let's find a way to access what's true for us. And then let's find a way to navigate our way through this journey in a way that we can accept every stage of the journey and we can actually learn to do it with compassion. And if we don't know how, then get someone to help you, because there are people that do know how. And I just want to say one last thing. I know I said the last thing 10 minutes ago. This really is this. When you're on the path and you've done the healing, check to see what your expectation is of because what happens is once you've healed, it's so easy to fall back into that expectation, to repeat the pattern of, Okay, so now maybe you've got away from all the positivity, you're not doing the bypassing, and you've learned all of this. And then when things go pear-shaped again, now you are punishing yourself because you should know better, because you already know all the stuff. Well, you don't know everything. You don't know everything. You haven't lived everything. You don't remember, unless you remember every single past life you've ever had and have had an enlightening experience, you don't know everything. So you know what? It's so easy to fall back into the pattern in a different form. And so then we get to the next cycle of acceptance, which is it's at a higher level than the one before, because you've got more awareness. But you know what? I have to accept that sometimes I'm just unhappy, even though I have an amazing life. I had this 2 days ago. And you know what I did? It's like, Loretta, what would you say to your client? So, you know what? I'd say, sit down and do in set A. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And what is that making you want to do? And, in just doing that process, and this is not the magic process for everyone. So what I'm saying, what I discovered was I wasn't actually feeling sad. I was feeling indifferent. And indifference is my strategy to cover my fear. And the minute I saw that, I was like, so in the past, I'd be like, oh, for God's sake, how many years? You've been doing this for 30 years? Look at you. I mean, how is it possible that it took you 3 days to find this? Can I tell you something? In my past, it would have taken me 3 years to find this. The fact that it took me 3 days to actually have the insight to go, you know what? I'm actually terrified. I'm actually scared. I'm scared of a number of things. Even though I have a magnificent life, there's a number of things that are currently scaring me. What can I do about that? You know what? I can actually go, thank you to myself, because the fear is trying to alert me to something. I can allow myself to feel it. I can invite it in. I can befriend it. And I can be who I really am. I don't have to be that tough, strong, know-it-all. I've got it together constantly. You know what? Today, I don't have it together. Does it make me a bad person? No. Does it make me a weakling? No. Does it make me stupid because I should have got it 3 days ago? No. It just makes me a person that I can treat with compassion. Okay, I'm definitely going to be quiet.
Thank you for reminding me of that. As you know, I needed this reminder at this point in time. Yeah, and I think part of the acceptance, many of us who get sick, we've done an episode on cancer personalities and stuff, really need to know that it's okay to ask for help and to get help and to receive and not always be the strong ones. And so, yes, the value in going to a coach and for help is huge. And I know Loretta's good at this. And the woman who gave me the PNI book went to Gary Player's daughter's coach in Durban. And that's how she got all this information that was passed on to me. So, and that woman should have died. The woman who gave me the book 8 years ago, and she's still very alive. So I'm quite sure that coach had a very big role to play as a catalyst. And with insight, she would never have gone on a journey with PNI if she hadn't been to that woman. And then she passed it on to me. So, yes, Loretta. So, yeah, here you have somebody who I know because she helps me for nothing. So
I've got to keep Antoinette alive. Otherwise, I've got to do all the admin on the podcast myself. She does most of the work, by the way. So I have a vested interest. I don't help you for free.
Well, thank you, Loretta. Thank you for this conversation. And yeah, acceptance, we're not saying all this stuff's easy. And as Loretta reminded me yesterday, because I was having a tough time again, the more we go on this path to really alignment with higher self, sometimes the harder it can get because it goes to deeper levels and layers and it plays out in our bodies, So if we're sick again, then we've just got to go back into this whole thing we've been talking about now, the compassion, self-awareness, the acceptance. So thank you, Loretta, for you and for what
Thank
you're
you.
doing. And yeah, please share this. I think we had a bad connection. We were a bit waffy, but there's always value. Okay? Always value.
Yes, because we're just humans, so we can actually also waffle sometimes. Okay.
We can be imperfect. That's a relief. That's another acceptance a lot of us have to have. Thank you, Loretta.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.